there, everyone. Today we're going to be working on getting black steel, and most importantly, a black steel anvil. And for a new material, we're going to need new ingredients. Now this is the 7th test hole I've been digging around, because you can usually get in these mountains, where I find a bit of garanite. Now, I don't think much of this at the time, but looking it up shows that it can be melted into nickel, which is one of the ingredients that I was looking for. Nickel is incredibly hard to get your hands on, especially early in the game, and it's also a required resource for actually progressing. So, with a deposit in this cave, underneath the marble layer, there should be an ore vein. So I'm just going to keep digging down until I hit something. And just as I was hoping, I did find an ore vein below that. And I have some good news and some bad news. Good news, this ore vein contains several types of nickel, so we should be able to get a good amount from it. Bad news, it spawned at the very bottom of where nickel can spawn. And it spawned on a ledge. So the ore vein that is already small, as nickel doesn't like to spawn, is even smaller, and digging it out will mean that we'll lose about half of it to cave-ins and gravity. But we only need a little bit of it for now. On the way back with my admittedly pitiful amount of nickel, I had a look at the other types of steel, as we'll need blue and red steel after black steel. Now, they use 50% black steel, so we'll need about half an ingot for every ingot of the next grade as well. Blue steel is simple enough. It's filled with a bunch of other alloys that we already have. Red steel, on the other hand, is a little bit more tricky. Again, you need to weld it with a piece of black steel, so it's about half, and the red steel mix itself has another ingot in it. But it requires some other ingredients, including some that we're going to have to go look for later. I grind and process the nickel that we do have down at the old manual setup, and I go and look at the black steel recipe. So, we're going to need to make weak black steel, which requires black bronze, a mix of silver, gold, and copper. We have gold, and we have copper. Silver, on the other hand, I've only ever found in one area. And, though it is relatively common, for us, it's going to be about as hard to get as nickel. So, I have to prepare for a trip. But that journey is going to need a lot of resources and food. So, in the meantime, I increase our power infrastructure by 4 water wheels, which still isn't enough to run all 3 grade 2 machines, make another batch of steel, and even make 4 steel plates, make an empty mold, turn it into a plate mold, which I thought you could use on the mold tables. Fumble around the mold table trying to figure out why I can't put the mold into it, even though the mold looks different than the extruder molds. And realize that it looks different because it goes into a forming press instead of an extruder. Something that I will need at least aluminum to be able to unlock. I decide to move on to something I can actually pull off, like mechanical crafters for a centrifuge. For a mechanical crafter, you need to make electron tubes, which isn't too difficult. It's glass, redstone, and some other parts. Redstone usually isn't an issue, except of course it is. Why would it be easy? To get redstone, we need a centrifuge, or to find the raw ore. The raw ore being as difficult to find as nickel, to the point where I literally have not found any of it. and I only have 3 bits of nickel, which is required to make the black steel to make the centrifuge. So I'm gonna have to go to this Electrum mine to go and look to see if I can find any redstone or anything else that might be able to produce the crafter. In the meantime, I've set up some cheese, all of these vessels, which now will preserve for extra long, since I managed to finish off my cellar with a climate control unit, which took 2 bits of redstone, which I didn't mine. I ended up having to loot it from a chest, which I thought was disabled. But in either case, I'm gonna have to go find redstone ore vein. And in case you were wondering why I needed that redstone, it's for red alloy, which is 80% redstone. I might as well get the redstone when I go out looking for nickel. So in the meantime, I crush down some zinc to combine with copper to get even more brass. I'm still having to do this the manual way with a hammer and then washing the ore. You can see, it still processes, but at least you can get a bunch of it really fast. 1 zinc dust and 9 copper dust is enough to make a batch of bronze. Each one of those dusts equals ingot, so you can get about 10 ingots per batch. I have to remember there is a capacity to these, so don't overmake. But while I wait for that brass that I've made to process down into plates to make the rest of the gears for the crafters, I need to go on that journey that I've been putting off to at least get some silver. But even after 5 test holes at every lead site near me that has a chance to spawn silver in the vein, and even some cave spelunking where I find even more gold in this local area, decide I might as well try and get some more iron before heading back into the camp, as I always seem to be running out of it. At least I know that gold will never be an issue, as I have so much of it I can't even store it in the chest anymore. That, and I didn't even manage to get a full stack of rich iron or normal iron while mining in an iron vein. Well, at least the plates are done, so I can make all 17 gears required for the crafters. That's another part done. And looking at the chest, it looks like the only thing I have to do is turn these glass bulbs into the electron tubes. So obviously the next thing I do is go to the highly unstable copper mines. Procrastinating. I don't know what you're talking about. But hey, I do find some silver. Of course, it's gravel based, so I can only get the worst kind of silver out of it, but it is something, I suppose. But in all seriousness, I did need copper anyway. And I don't leave the old copper mine until I've gotten well and truly into the 3rd floor, with the entire top layer being cleared out, the 2nd layer being almost completely done, and the 3rd layer being moderately collapsed. All things said and done, I did get a good amount of copper. I even went back to pick up all of the silver gravel that I could find. I even take the time to pan through about half of the stack of silver gravel that I managed to pick up, only to find 1 poor quality ruby and 5 silver nuggets. That's not even close to enough. Now for the thing I've been dreading. This is where we are. This is all of our ores and all of our setup. Everything within about 500 blocks. We've been exceedingly lucky so far. And down all the way to the left, about 5,000 blocks out, is the only silver deposit I have ever found. And no, I can't dig under the silver gravel. I tried that, and there's no deposit. So now I have to walk along the length of this river all the way to the only silver spot I found. But in the end, we do it. We travel for literally 3 hours just to get some silver. Now, this is linked up to a cave which can cause problems and cave-ins, but really, I don't care. I'm gonna be here for long enough that any cave-in won't have much effect on me. And so I do keep mining, until I run out of space and I'm getting drowned just to try and expand the mine even slightly. But I do at least get a nice haul. Good few stacks of silver, and even some toxic galena that can be processed down into silver after I get a centrifuge. Now to walk from here all the way across the desert, mountains, rivers, and back to base. But I do stop for a moment and pose. This is where I was when I was mining out the silver to actually upload the video for the vote. So you might be able to recognize a couple of things from that video. But I do at least get some luck on the way back, finding a bunch of green and red apple saplings. Even managed to get 10 of each type of sapling to build an orchard, as well as enough leaves to have as many drying mats as I want. Back at the base, I take the little bit of nickel I found when I was mining out saltpeter. All those episodes ago, I mined out almost the entire vein, and got what will now be an additional 4 nickel from that vein. I also end up grinding up all of the silver I got from the travel, which comes out to be just under 40 silver ingots worth of silver dust. And so combining it with gold bars and a bit of copper dust, we can start producing the black bronze needed for black steel. For this mix, we're going to be doing something unusual and using an extra gold bar to make our black bronze instead of an extra silver. Usually, gold is harder to get than silver, just not in the region that we ended up settling. And because of the rules of alloying, we can get 10 ingots worth of black bronze from that one batch. I also cook up all 9 of our nickel dust. This way I can turn them all into ingots to have a better count of ore. Okay, so now we have the nickel and we have the black bronze. Now we need the steel. The ratio is roughly 1 ingot of nickel and black bronze per 2 ingots of steel. So if I want to use all 9 nickel ingots, I'll need 18 steel ingots. And it isn't until I start producing the steel that I realize that just like blue and red steel, it needs an extra ingot, this time being pig iron, which is easy enough. I just have to make 9 pig iron ingots along with 18 steel ingots. So that's about another half increased on the amount of iron that I have to put through the bloomery. And so while waiting for those steel ingots to finish processing, I pin a bunch of red and blue steel items. Blue steel is better for speed and abilities, but red steel is almost unbreakable. So for all crafting tools, I want to make them out of red steel, while mining and other tools I want blue steel, even though it has a bit less durability. And so with the steel, I put all of my nickel and black bronze into the crucible to melt. I thought that I could just use more black bronze and steel to make up the difference and use less nickel in the end, because I wanted to conserve it, as the recipe had a little bit of percentage give in both directions. But I forgot one important thing. A crucible does not have unlimited capacity. And so, when I put the steel in to melt, thinking I was going to make a big batch and balance it that way, so that the percentage would mean less, the crucible overfilled. And now I was left with a batch of unknown metal that I now had to rapidly balance. If I couldn't get this to be within tolerance, I would have just wasted the majority of my nickel. And so I started siphoning more and more out of a vessel to balance the mixture, to give it more room to add other ingots to actually equal out to a proper recipe. And then, just as I thought I had done it, by adding enough steel that it equaled enough, I realized there was too much black bronze, and now there wasn't even the 15% nickel required, because of how much I had to take out of the batch. I now needed to add more nickel, but in smaller quantities, meaning I'd have to destroy the bars and turn them into rods to have half an ingot's worth, just to try and balance it out. In the end, I had to rely on using poor nickel ore that I wasn't able to process in our primitive setup to balance the mixture. In the end, it took every nickel ingot and every bit of steel I had, but I was able to balance the mixture to make a batch of weak black steel at twice the cost of nickel that it should have been. In the end, I was able to get 25 weak black steel ingots, where if I had used the normal recipe, I would have managed to get almost 36. I then at least was able to make enough pig iron to balance it out and finish off the ingots. I then worked on welding the two types of ingots together. Unfortunately, you don't get two ingots from this. The two ingots combine into one ingot. And after welding, I can forge the black steel ingot to reduce its carbon level and get a proper, full-grade black steel ingot. If I get 14 of these, I can make a black steel anvil to keep progressing. And now with the ingots turned into double ingots, I can forge them together to get a brand new black steel anvil. This is one grade below the max level of anvil. I bring my old steel anvil down to the Helvhammer and swap out my wrought iron one. This will speed up the forging process for it by a little. And though I'd usually end the episode on the anvils, I figured I should probably make at least an attempt at getting a boiler set up so I can use my coke oven more. And so I put some iron sheets to work and grind down the entirety of the nickel that I got from that whole nickel vein that I found. If you've noticed, normal veins I can have several inventory loads worth. With that one nickel vein, I don't even have a stack of nickel after mining out the entire thing. It's gonna be a problem later. I set some tin in to smelt so I can make pipes, process some more steel for sheets, finally make a tin double ingot after 5 attempts because of how low its melting temperature is, as well as realizing that it wanted tin alloy instead of pure tin, which is a hell of a lot easier to make because it doesn't melt instantly. Make the pipes with the wrench, then we can combine it with some steel and glass to make specifically a liquid boiler, as this can run off the creosote that we get from making steel. Attaching it to a pipe here starts it heating up instantly, but we'll need water as well as a way to get the steam out, because this is a RegTech machine, and they like to explode if you don't do the thing that they exactly request. So I put it inside away from the rain, because that's another thing that can make them explode. And with this, I think we're done for today. We've got a good amount of steel, and we can keep progressing through the age. But we'll need to build the workshop first. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. See you next time.